Okay, so I got cut off um, in this part. So I just kind of want to reiterate that passive transport just happens with the concentration gradient, which is just the normal movement of molecules from high to low concentration. So if you look at this little image here, you can see that the green molecules never cross the barrier, but the little water molecules will go freely across. Excuse me. And it'll bounce from one side to the other to make it as equal as possible so that there's equal amounts of water um, on both sides. Second type of transport we have is facilitated transport. So facilitated transport is facilitated means kind of like helping. So we have movement across the membrane, but we're using what we call transport molecules, and they're just like special doors. They don't really have an opening; they're just always open, and things just pass through them. They require maybe just like a little bit of energy, but not too much. So facilitated transport is um, usually just a form of diffusion where the little doors are there and they're always open and things just pass through it. But sometimes they do require a little bit of energy. So, for example, glucose, which is sugar, and your body needs sugar because we need it for creating energy for your body. Glucose is way big. It's C6H12O6, way too big of a molecule to just kind of pass through your cell membrane. So, what we need is a special door that helps move it across your cell membrane. And one thing to kind of consider is this. So, like, is it worth spending just a little bit of energy in order to get your glucose across? And the answer is yes, and we'll get to that, later in the year when we do cell respiration. So the last type of transport is what we call active transport. And active transport is exactly as it sounds. It's movement, it requires energy, sometimes requires a lot of energy. And it's when you're forcing molecules to go across the membrane that may not necessarily want to go across the membrane. So usually, all right, we're moving large molecules. It could be big pieces of food that your cell needs. It could be liquids. It could be charged particles, which we call ions. So active transport is usually large molecules. Two types of active transport is something called phagocytosis. So cytosis is just having to do with the cell and moving things across the cell, and this is when we're moving solids. So like food items, sometimes you need to bring just whole molecules in, and pinocytosis is when you bring thick liquids in. And the key thing about the active transport, the reason why it's active is because you're literally going against the concentration gradient. Normally, you would go from high to low, but the active transport forces molecules across the membrane and it's kind of like just think of you're trying to clean up your room, you're just shoving as much stuff in your closet as possible, right? Forcing things into a box or forcing things into a closet, that's like active transport. It shouldn't really fit, but you're going to force it. One example is if you have a root, like it for a plant, and if you're trying to get minerals out of the soil and you want to absorb them and you want to force them into the root, so that your plant has enough nutrients. Sometimes you're going to force molecules in so that your cell or your plant can actually thrive and live. Um, so, in general, there are general types of active transport. So endocytosis is anytime you're entering a cell or you're going to bring something in. You could be bringing in a large liquid or you could be bringing in a large um, solid. And what happens is you create this little membrane or this little vesicle, and the membrane folds in. And this is how you create vacuoles. It's also how you sometimes create lysosome. So if your Golgi body has like a protein and maybe you just don't need the protein, the Golgi body can actually like merge with the lysosome and create it and have the digestive juices inside of it. So in this image, okay, we have like particles for some reason on the outside of the cell that we need to bring in. And so what happens is that the cell membrane literally folds in, and your cells do this. Obviously we don't feel it, but your cells literally fold in. It's like a little indent. And eventually what happens is that the top of it gets narrower and narrower and it pinches off. And your cell membrane connects here, and this becomes a new vesicle. It just floats around in your cell. Your cell membrane is like super versatile and super flexible. So it allows for you to kind of like pinch off and create little vesicles that just float in your cell. And the opposite of endocytosis is exocytosis, when you just got to get rid of something. So, like, let's say you're trying to digest something, you want to get rid of waste. Well, you don't want the waste just hanging out in your cell. Let's just say this is the lysosome. So, what happens is the lysosome goes and it travels to the cell membrane and it forces itself up, and it literally becomes part of the cell membrane. And then instead of like pinching off and creating a vesicle, it forces itself out, and all of the stuff you don't need just goes out into kind of like your interstitial areas, and your body will take care of it and it'll process it. So, in summary, there are three types of transport. The first one is passive, which you can see here. Here's your cell membrane. Here are molecules just moving across, no problem. Facilitated transport is when you have a little helper. You have things going through what we call a door, or this is like a very special protein, and the protein's open and things just kind of fit through there. Sometimes a little bit of energy necessary, but generally it's kind of just open and it protects the cell membrane and allows for things to pass through. And the last type is active transport, when you have this door, but it has to be activated by energy, which we call ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So you must use energy in order to um, do active transport. And the reason why you would want to spend energy is because it's more advantageous to have whatever it is you're forcing in to your cell than to not have it. So it's worth the spending the energy. So I hope this helps. You're welcome to watch this over again and to kind of review anything that didn't make sense. Let me know if you have any questions. And good luck on your little web quest worksheet.